Patreon and Spotify have a thing going on. The latest from podnews.net with the Dr. John Deloney Show. An integration between Patreon and Spotify has been announced, allowing all creators to offer patron-only content to Spotify listeners. You can connect your Spotify and Patreon accounts to access patron-exclusive podcasts right where you're already listening to your favorite audio content, the company says. Supporting Cast and Supercast are also supported in the Spotify app. Well, you can support Pod News via Patreon. Your support funds our reporting and tools for the whole industry. You'll find that at podnews.net/Patreon. Podcast editing tool Descript has launched a slew of new tools in beta. Regenerate uses AI to rebuild words or phrases. Eye Contact edits video to keep your eyes on the camera, even if you are looking somewhere else. Replace Selection lets you change a part of the audio or video you're working on without messing up the timings of everything else. The company's changelog also reveals a new web interface. Airwave Podcast Network has signed a distribution deal with Spoken Layer, including marketing and programmatic monetization of 24 podcasts from major media brands like the History Channel, Wired, Fast Company, IGN and TechCrunch. Airwave are currently sponsoring our podcast news section. Public radio broadcaster KQED has acquired Snap Judgment Studios, which produces Snap Judgment and Spooked. In Russia, Apple Podcasts was fined 400,000 rubles, that's $4,250, for not deleting content with, quote, incorrect information about the conflict in Ukraine. We reported 2 content providers on Monday who were temporarily removed from Apple Podcasts following a complaint from the Russian government. Pod News isn't available in Russia and Belarus. The countries illegally invaded Ukraine in February last year. What goes around comes around. Arrow Media will represent Acast in Queensland in Australia. The company also represents Yahoo. Acast was initially represented by Nova Entertainment across Australia in a deal based out of Nova's Queensland offices until 2020. Small Podcaster is open source code that takes your audio and will produce a transcript, chapter points and ideas for titles and tweets. In the UK, the Radio Academy has opened its annual 30 under 30 list. Any individual who's been working in UK radio or UK-based audio businesses for at least 12 months is eligible, as long as they're aged under 30, of course. And thank you to Red Circle, which becomes our latest gold supporter today. Red Circle is a place to host your podcast and grow your revenue, and have a number of great tools to help you do both. Pod News supporters like Red Circle help fund our free news, jobs and events boards, with more to come for everyone. And our funding model means we don't rely on either advertising or supporters, allowing us to be objective in our reporting. We'd love it if you supported us too. You can do that at podnews.net/support. And in podcast news, Big Picture Science looks at modern science research through smart and funny storytelling. It's a show which recently has looked at tapeworms and parasites, tiny robots that can travel through our blood vessels, the last day of the dinosaurs, and why the US hasn't gone metric. It's part of the Airwave Podcast Network, and we thank them for their support this month. A new edition of the Podcast Academy's Podcast 360 is out today, with Donald Albright interviewing me. You can expect to hear why you shouldn't call your podcast Real Talk, not if you want anyone to find it, that is. And from Better Homes and Gardens, The Better Buy returns for a new season to delve into the full home buying process, from house hunting and moving to interior design and landscaping. Each episode will progress through this home ownership journey, with host Melanie Bellier talking to both experts and celebrities who'll share their stories, practical tips and advice. And in our newsletter today, a tweet from Elon Musk. But the good news is you're on the podcast, so you don't have to have that. This podcast is sponsored, though, by the Dr. John Deloney Show. For practical advice on how to connect with people, face depression, overcome anxiety, and what it means to be well, find the Dr. John Deloney Show wherever you get your podcasts. And that's the latest from our newsletter. To read all the stories and subscribe, we're at podnews.net.